I'm sitting here in a quiet corner of Naboo's capital of Theed. It is a city known for its classical architecture carved in ancient stone. The whole city looks like a monument to peace, but these walkways hide a much darker truth. It was in a corridor exactly like the one I'm sitting here that a young Sheev Palpatine first met with Higo Damask, Darth Plagueis. It's where the Sith began to weave their web right beneath the noses of the Republic. While the Sith Masters were busy with their politics and grand plans, they were also crafting a very precise and deadly weapon that would be unleashed in these very streets. When we take a look at a character like Darth Maul, it's easy to understand that he's a dangerous individual. Everything from his red face paired with black tattoos, horns that crown his head, to his athletic gait that screams, "Do not mess with me." But of course, for the average Jedi, they're used to dealing with such fearsome individuals like this. But there's a good reason why even someone as skilled as Qui-Gon Jinn can fall to this dark assassin's blade. You see, even amongst the Sith, Darth Maul is in a category all by himself. He is uniquely dangerous. The Sith in many ways evolved to become the exact opposite of the Jedi Order, especially the rule of two Sith. While the Jedi Order operated in the open within view of public and Senate scrutiny and maximized their visibility and still trust in their organization and the Republic, the rule of two Sith were secretive and stayed to the shadows, utilizing opaque parallel systems of power like the political patronage system that truly controlled the Galactic Senate. Plagueis also had an island. It was more like a moon, actually, but, you know. The Jedi recruited their members as infants to make sure that they weren't tainted by the chaotic galaxy, so that they could shape them into balanced and emotionally disciplined warriors. The Sith, on the other hand, preferred their apprentices to be older and seasoned with cruelty and anger. Ideally, these were individuals who had experienced severe trauma and suffering at a young age, or at least developed some kind of hunger or some yearning for love, acceptance, power, anything that could be twisted into hatred and fuel for the dark side. Now, in my opinion, this preference to have older apprentices is also driven by the fact that the average Sith does not really have the time nor the patience to take care of a child, let alone an infant. You know, at these ages, children still need nurturing, some basic care so that they don't become developmentally stunted, which of course would hurt their abilities later on in life, which is not ideal when you're training an apprentice. Now, there are a few cases in which Sith Lords did have the patience for such endeavors. That includes Darth Bane, who took on a young girl, Zana, as his apprentice. He, of course, was a big picture guy, probably one of the most influential Sith of his generation. He created the rule of two. His overall mission was important enough for him that he actually ends up raising his apprentice from childhood. It wasn't exactly like a father-daughter relationship with Sith characteristics. It was more of a mentorship that sometimes mimicked parental care, but the ultimate goal was to create a capable successor. The other Sith Lord who went in this direction was, interestingly enough, Darth Sidious, aka Sheev Palpatine. While some might view him as more of an impulsive and reckless Sith Lord, especially after he executed Order 66 and consolidated power, at least initially, when he was an apprentice under Darth Plagueis, that mentorship imparted in him a sense of calm and patience that really helped him hide in plain sight as the Supreme Chancellor of the very Republic they were trying to destroy. Now, decades before Sidious's ascent to the Chancellorship, he roamed these very streets trying to gather assets and become very powerful, just like his master. And it's during this time Darth Sidious allied himself with another powerful Force user, Mother Talzin, a Dathomiri witch matriarch. Talzin had a young son known as Maul, and like his mother, his power in the Force was substantial. Sidious noticed the young boy and his barely concealed anger and around 40 BBY. When Maul was barely a teenager, he would take him as his apprentice. We're not exactly sure if his mother gave him away willingly or Palpatine kind of just took him. It's probably somewhere in the middle, I think. As the relationship between Talzin and Sidious was more or less transactional, both Dark Force users hungered for the other's knowledge about the Force, but neither really trusted the other. Now, Palpatine's approach to training Maul was ironically a lot more like the Jedi than your typical Sith. His training was all about complete control over his young apprentice. He wanted to shape this young man into an obedient tool and erase any ego or desire for power that he could potentially develop. Just like the Jedi, Palpatine feared the hubris and ambition in his underling. I mean, he probably thought he had enough of that for the two of them. Darth Sidious was like Bane in one way. He was a transformative leader for the Sith, but unlike the rest of the Sith that preceded him in the Rule of Two era, he wasn't really interested in the whole sharing of power. He wanted to create a rule of one. Palpatine would place Maul under a strict regime of martial training and just, I guess you could call it torture. The young boy was constantly exposed to pain, which led to fear until it categorized into a deep anger and hatred. The goal was to erase what little identity Maul had and replace it with one singular purpose: to serve Palpatine as a tool. And to understand why Maul is so different from other Sith, we simply have to look at what was left out of Maul's tutelage. There are no lessons about the painful history between the Jedi and the Sith. Instead, Maul's hatred for the Jedi comes from the fact that they never looked for him as a youngling and selected him for his order. It was all about neglect. An idea surely planted in his mind by Palpatine, designed to create a sense of doubt in Maul's own personal self, but also create resentment and hatred for the order. After all, Maul had a lot of horrible emotions that were brought out from his training. He had it directed at someone or something. Darth Sidious was too powerful to hate. Maul always feared him until his dying days. And so Sidious pointed his apprentice towards the Jedi. They became the prey that he hunted with blind fury and contempt. Maul also received none of the classical Sith trainings of political and social manipulation, which was especially important for a rule of two Sith, who were supposed to operate from the shadows with cunning and not direct force. But then again, a hunter like Maul doesn't need to communicate with their prey, they just need to track them, study them until they ultimately strike. This is perhaps why Maul never had much dialogue before fighting the Jedi, especially earlier on in his career, and instead simply paced back and forth in front of them while glaring at them like he wants to eat them. Maul is very different from your typical rule of two Sith, who are mostly Renaissance men, who were very well-balanced and studied the arts, culture, history. These were individuals who could blend in with the elites of the galaxy in their own rights and talk shop and gather influence. The Sith also mastered a wide array of skills like Force alchemy, the sciences, and developed a deep understanding of economics and the political orders in the galaxy. The fact that Sidious didn't bother to teach Maul even the basics shows us what his true purpose was. And so a little positive reinforcement he received in those early years just came from victory in training and in battles. In this way, Maul's mind was uncluttered and focused, allowing him to become a force to be reckoned with, the deadliest Sith weapon in Darth Sidious's arsenal. As such, Maul was proficient in a variety of different lightsaber forms, but the style he would gravitate the most towards was Juyo, or Form 7. Juyo was only used by those familiar with the dark side and involved the user channeling their raw emotions into their strikes, creating a powerful feedback loop with each successful connection with an enemy's blade or armor or their face. It's like eating edibles and then getting munchies and eating more edibles. It's the kind of decision making you see from people who pack only one pair of underwear for a week-long trip. It's individuals who like to live on the edge and flirt with danger. And so from the outside, Form 7 looks animalistic and wild, characterized by explosive flurries of activity and awkward stances and strikes combined with a staggered and off-kilter rhythm that felt both unnatural and also hard to predict. This form was especially deadly against post-Ruusan Reformation Jedi who had never seen a Sith. Even individuals as skilled as Qui-Gon Jinn were not really prepared for this kind of fighting. While he was considered a top duelist in the Order, he only had experience fighting other Jedi, and usually only the more standard forms. There was a Form 7 fighter within the Order, Mace Windu, but he utilized the light side variant of the style known as Vapad, which is quite different from fighting someone using Juyo. It was most likely shocking for Qui-Gon to first experience fighting Maul. Everything he had known about dueling and positioning was thrown out the window. He only survived those early fights thanks to his own immense force powers and ability with the saber. But Juyo was just something completely different. I mean, even skilled Sith Lords avoided this technique because, one, to get too immersed in their own cycle of hatred and lose control, actually exposing weaknesses and also causing uncontrolled destruction. It might seem counterintuitive, but to master Juyo, it requires an individual with not only immense power and anger, but also skill, discipline, and self-control. Otherwise, a Juyo practitioner will be their own worst enemy. Now, Maul also preferred using a double-edged lightsaber, which is incredibly difficult to use, but well paired with Juyo. The double-bladed sword gives the user far more coverage, but also requires good spatial awareness to use. More importantly, twice the blade means twice the attack, a relentless attack that, again, matches well with Form 7's strike. The strategy with this combination is all about surprise and overwhelming the enemy as quickly as possible. When confronting Qui-Gon Jinn in his last battle, Maul isolated the more skilled fighter from his Padawan and then started pressing Qui-Gon, never giving him a chance to breathe. Qui-Gon also utilized the more acrobatic Form 4 Ataru technique, but since it required so much energy and force usage, he ultimately lost energy and couldn't keep up with Darth Maul's more youthful conditioning. When Maul and Qui-Gon entered that final plasma chamber on Naboo, Qui-Gon was already gassed, at which point Maul shifted his tempo to maximum and defeated him. Maul's ability to change rhythm and tempo in the middle of a fight and focus more on unbalancing his enemy is probably one of his best hidden secrets. He really looks at the entire fight as a conditioning kind of event rather than a sprint, which is interesting because, again, he's a Geo practitioner. He's kind of very well-rounded as a fighter. It's basically all he really focuses on. But that is Geo in essence. It's all about keeping things moving and unpredictable so your opponent is too busy reacting to actually launch their own offensive. This is the duality of Maul, who is ferocious and wild, but also patient. He stalked, observed, and hunted Qui-Gon like a prized game across many planets over the span of several days. He developed a strategy, probably obsessed over fighting Qui-Gon Jinn, and that is why he was so successful at defeating a far more seasoned and experienced Force user. Appearances in Form 7 can be misleading. While Qui-Gon thought he was fighting a wild Sith animal, what he was really encountering was something far more dangerous, a cunning assassin and master duelist. But when Maul finally tasted victory for the first time, he faltered like a lot of Sith do. He succumbed to his own emotions because they don't exactly train to control that aspect of themselves. For the first time, hubris and overconfidence fills his veins with a carelessness that is uncharacteristic of this disciplined warrior. And he gets defeated by Qui-Gon Jinn's Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is probably an even bigger upset than him defeating Qui-Gon Jinn. And this all happens at the Naboo Plasma Refinery, just like a stone's throw away from where I'm sitting. Interesting note about this duel, Obi-Wan is normally associated with Form 3 or Sarusu's form of lightsaber combat, a very conservative and defensive shell technique, which is good against blaster fire and multiple melee combatants. It's actually one of the weaker forms against Joe, and in general it's not a really good form against dueling forms, like Form 2 as well, as there are not many opportunities for Form 3 practitioner to strike at the enemy and interrupt their fight. A good Sarusu practitioner expends very little energy using a series of movements that creates almost like a defensive shell. Against really skilled duelists, their best bet at winning is just to drag the fight on for a longer time and wear their opponents out. It's all about endurance. But Geo is extremely hard to predict. But even Form 3 doesn't work that well against Geo because Geo is a later form that was designed directly to pierce the defenses of some of these earlier and more standard forms. And so the endurance wear your enemy out strategy doesn't always work. Plus, there's a psychological element of Geo in which the dark side begins to seep out from the dark side Force user and affect everyone around him. We see Kymer use this technique with great effect. The sense of fear and hatred emanating off of him overwhelms the High Republic era Jedi who are clearly not trained for such encounters. They become confused as the dark side washes over them. They become disoriented and are no longer able to even do simple defensive moves. The longer Jedi is exposed to this, the harder it is for them to concentrate and connect to the Force, and so the only way to really defeat Geo is by using Vapad. That is the light side form of Form 7, which conducts the dark side and throws it back at the Sith fighter. Another good tactic to use against Geo is more aggressive form that ends the battle as quickly as possible so that the dark side does not begin to cloud their connection. Now, Obi-Wan as a younger practitioner fought very differently from when he becomes a master and is more wise and measured. In his youth, he uses the explosive and acrobatic Atara form just like his master. Obi-Wan was in much better conditioning than Qui-Gon, and he was most likely filled with a bit of rage when he saw his master die, and so he unleashes a flurry of strikes that ultimately surprises Maul and almost catches him off guard. Unfortunately, Atara depends heavily on longer strikes, and the use of momentum from giant leaps and flips, not ideal in more confined spaces. Geo, however, excels at this, and he manages to regain control of the duel from Obi-Wan Kenobi pretty quickly and disarms the young Padawan. Interestingly enough, this was one of the best showings that Obi-Wan has against Maul. They duel several times before their final showdown on Tatooine, and Maul pretty much wipes the floor with Obi-Wan when he uses Sarusu. Obi-Wan Kenobi actually seems significantly weaker in these encounters. Just a little more insight in the rock, paper, scissors nature of lightsaber forms. Now, Obi-Wan Kenobi's ultimate skill is that he always keeps cool no matter how much more powerful his enemy is, how much more skilled they are, and takes advantage of every opportunity he has, whether he has the high ground or he's holding the low ground, which is a testament to his mental discipline and consistency as a fighter. And proof that even though Darth Maul was one of the best duelists in Star Wars history, he was also an imbalanced and incomplete person, which of course led to his defeat. But Maul's pain, tolerance, and rage was so great that even when he was cut in half, he somehow clung to life like a second coming of Darth Sion. Although the light side is known more for transcending death, the dark side also has its own quirks. Some individuals are too angry and full of hatred to actually let go of life.